cold marble corridors of the Hart Senate office building trembled that afternoon, not from footsteps or routine bustle, but from the sheer gravity pressing against its walls. This was no ordinary day. The polished floors reflected more than the gleam of chandeliers. They mirrored the unease settling over Washington's political core. Seasoned reporters who had covered decades of hearings, men and women hardened by countless stage confrontations and predictable soundbites, leaned into each other, whispering with hushed urgency. "Something is different today," they said, as if the building itself carried a warning. Diplomats from distant capitals adjusted their ties, their posture unusually rigid, eyes darting across the chamber like soldiers anticipating a clash. Even the ancient busts of former statesmen seemed to watch with curiosity, their cold marble gazes sharpened by history's anticipation. The sunlight that streamed through the towering windows did not merely warm the hall. It carved the air into slices of gold, laying out a stage where centuries of arrogance and resistance were about to collide. Behind the mahogany panels, where countless deals had been whispered and countless truths buried, a confrontation waited. It was no longer politics as usual. The staffers sensed it too. Their steps were quicker, their whispers tighter. The lobbyists, who normally exuded arrogance, shuffled with unease as if they had walked into a theater where the script was no longer theirs to control. The Senate hearing room, normally a place of carefully orchestrated drama, now felt like a coliseum, its walls vibrating with the electricity of conflict. And then he entered. Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, walked with a quiet dignity that silenced the murmurs. No tailored suit, no manicured American polish. His uniform was simple but alive with symbolism. The fatigues of a soldier who had slept in trenches, who had tasted betrayal and stood his ground, who carried on his shoulders not just personal authority, but the weight of an entire people. His boots seemed to echo louder than any gavel, carrying the red earth of Africa into the sterile marble of Washington. His face was calm, but his presence charged the atmosphere. He was not a visitor. He was not a guest. He was a storm contained within flesh, walking into the lion's den with the steadiness of one who had faced greater predators. In his silence alone, the chamber shifted. The sterile room became alive, trembling with possibility, unpredictable, dangerous. Across from him sat Senator Ted Cruz, already in position. He leaned back slightly, but his body language betrayed readiness. This was his arena. He had turned hearings into theater for years. Each confrontation another clip for the cameras, another chance to smirk at an opponent and claim dominance. His fingers tapped lightly against the polished wood, a predator's rhythm, confident in his coming performance. His aides had armed him well. Notes sharpened like knives, questions designed not to seek answers, but to cut flesh. To Cruz, this was another stage, another foreign leader to interrupt, another viral moment waiting to be harvested. His smirk flickered, the well-rehearsed smile of superiority. The gavel struck 3 times, heavy, measured, final. It rolled through the chamber like thunder over a mountain range, silencing all sound but the storm that was about to break. Chairman Martinez called the hearing to order, his voice lined with ceremony. Yet even he, a man accustomed to protocol, seemed aware that this session carried a weight far beyond Washington. Traoré adjusted the microphone. No stack of papers, no folders, no speech written by advisors. His eyes swept the chamber, not nervously but deliberately, like a commander scanning a battlefield before the first shots were fired. And then he spoke. His accented English was steady, deliberate, almost lyrical. "Honorable senators, I come before you not as a supplicant, but as the leader of a free people." The words had barely begun when Cruz's voice slashed across them like steel. "Mr. Traoré, if I may interrupt, your government's recent actions suggest otherwise." The temperature in the room dropped. The first blow had landed. Cameras zoomed instantly. Journalists scribbled furiously. Diplomats stiffened. The old game had begun. Interrupt, destabilize, dominate. Traoré paused, his dark eyes fixed on Cruz with the patience of a teacher facing an unruly child. His jaw moved, tightening just slightly, the only sign of his recognition of the insult. He did not falter. He did not break rhythm. His hands rested firm upon the table, posture upright, breathing calm. He radiated a truth long prepared for moments like this. Disrespect was expected, survival meant composure, and dignity was his weapon. "Senator Cruz," he replied, voice calm but edged with sharpened steel, "I appreciate your eagerness to engage." The word eagerness hung in the air like a dagger tipped in honey. Diplomats smirked. Reporters leaned forward. Senators who had prepared to dismiss him suddenly straightened. For the first time, Cruz's mask cracked. A flicker in the eyes, a tightening at the corner of his mouth. The predator had miscalculated. The duel had begun. Again, Cruz struck. He dismissed Traoré's testimony as victimization rhetoric, words designed to humiliate, to reduce Africa's history to complaint. But Traoré's response cut cleaner. "Senator, your concern for my nation's sovereignty is touching." The word touching floated into the chamber like a match into dry grass. Some in the audience smiled involuntarily. Cruz's smirk faltered. The third interruption came like clockwork. The pattern was undeniable now. This was not a hearing. It was deliberate humiliation dressed as politics. Cruz interrupted not to debate, but to assert colonial dominance in a chamber far from Africa's soil. Yet with every insult, Traoré grew taller. His patience was not weakness. It was iron forged in fire. His silence between words was not absence. It was strategy. By the fourth interruption, even Cruz's allies grew uneasy. Diplomats shifted uncomfortably. Senators looked away. The optics had changed. What began as a performance of American authority was unraveling into desperation. Cruz's dominance shrank with every word. Traoré's dignity expanded with every pause. Then the turning point. Traoré's voice sliced through the tension like a scalpel. "Senator, your difficulty allowing others to speak reveals more about your character than mine." The words detonated in silence. Cruz faltered. His mouth opened, no sound emerging. The room froze. For a breathless moment, the predator stared into a mirror he had never expected. His prey was not prey. His stage was not his. The duel was no longer between two men. It had become a battle of narratives. Arrogance versus dignity. Colonial power versus sovereign pride. Cameras broadcast the clash across the globe. On phones in Africa, crowds gathered in markets, villages, and cities, watching in real time as one of their own stood unshaken in Washington. By the sixth interruption, Cruz's desperation was naked. His accusations grew sharper, more reckless. He spoke of instability, of alliances, of democracy under threat. But no one heard strength. They heard fear. Diplomats leaned forward, realizing history was pivoting before their eyes. Journalists typed furiously, already crafting headlines that would outlive careers. And then the final blow. Traoré rose not quickly, but with deliberate gravity, as if centuries rose with him. His presence filled the chamber with something larger than politics. His voice thundered not with rage, but with the controlled fire of ancestral truth. "Senator Cruz," he declared, each word a hammer strike, "you interrupt me because you cannot bear to hear an African speak as an equal. But I am not your colonial subject, and Africa is not your plantation." The words ripped through the chamber like lightning-splitting stone. Gasps erupted, journalists scribbled, cameras zoomed, phones buzzed as the moment spread instantly across continents. Hashtags ignited from Lagos to London, from Nairobi to New York. It was no longer politics, it was vindication. Cruz slumped, the smirk gone, his authority drained. Traoré stood unshaken, the embodiment of defiance, of dignity, of Africa itself. The chamber dissolved into chaos, but the verdict had already been written into history. Across Ouagadougou, Nairobi, Lagos, Accra, Johannesburg, people poured into streets, waving flags, singing, cheering. Youth groups erupted in celebration, chanting Traoré's words as slogans. Editorials exploded. Diplomatic cables flew. Universities prepared case studies. Leaders of the global South declared it proof that the balance of power was shifting. In Washington, silence stretched. The collapse of Cruz's dominance echoed louder than any insult he had spoken. It was not merely a hearing. It was a reckoning, a moment carved into marble and memory. A young soldier president had stood not just for Burkina Faso, but for Africa, for the silenced, for the global South. His voice had traveled across oceans and centuries, reminding the world that Africa's voice existed and it would never again be interrupted.